I used to think the worst thing about living alone was the silence. The way every creak of the floorboards echoed through empty rooms. How my own breathing seemed too loud in the dark. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. The worst thing about living alone is realizing you're not actually alone at all. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a freelance graphic designer working from my apartment in Maple Grove Residences, a mid-century building with thin walls and cheaper rent than anything else in the city. When I moved into Unit 4B 6 months ago, I was just grateful to find something I could afford. The apartment across the hall for C had been empty for weeks. At least, that's what I thought. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was carrying groceries up the stairs. The elevator had been broken for 3 days. When I noticed the door to for Celsius was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had closed it, but the latch hadn't quite caught. I paused on the landing, bags cutting into my palms, and stared at that sliver of darkness between the door and frame. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish even as I did it. Silence. I should have kept walking. Should have minded my own business and gone into my apartment. But curiosity or maybe loneliness made me step closer. Is someone there? The door's open. Still nothing. I was about to knock when I heard a soft sound, barely audible, like fabric rustling or breathing. My hand froze inches from the wood. Every instinct screamed at me to back away, but before I could move, a voice came from inside. "Thank you," just those 2 words, whispered so quietly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined them. The door clicked shut with a finality that made my skin prickle. I stood there for a full minute, hard hammering, before forcing myself to turn away. As I fumbled with my keys, I felt that crawling sensation between my shoulder blades that tells you someone is watching. I glanced back at for C. The door was closed, the hallway empty. But in the peephole, I could swear I saw the flicker of movement, like someone had just stepped back into shadow. After that day, I became hyper-aware of my neighbor. I'd hear sounds through the wall. We shared footsteps at odd hours, usually between 2 and 4 a.m., not the normal sounds of someone walking to the bathroom or getting water. These were deliberate, pacing footsteps that went back and forth for hours. But it was the daytime that really bothered me. During the day, there was nothing. Complete silence. No TV, no music, no running water, no sounds of cooking or moving furniture or any of the normal activities people do in their homes. Just silence. I tried to catch glimpses of my neighbor. I'd time my comings and goings, linger in the hallway, even pretend to check my mailbox multiple times a day. But I never saw anyone enter or leave for C. Mrs. Kowalski, the elderly woman in 4A, confirmed what I'd started to suspect. "Oh honey, that apartment's been rented for years," she told me one afternoon, her arthritic hands wrapped around a cup of tea I'd made her. "Same tenant. Never causes any trouble. Rent's always paid on time." According to Dennis was our building super, a gruff man who spent most of his time in the basement and seemed to hate human interaction. "Have you ever seen them?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Kowalski's wrinkled face scrunched in thought. I don't think I have. Not in, well, it must be years now. Keeps to themselves, I suppose. Years?" I set my own cup down. "Mrs. K, that's not normal. What if something's wrong? What if they're hurt or maybe they just value their privacy?" Her tone was gentle, but firm. "Not everyone wants to be neighborly, dear. Especially in a city like this." She was right. Of course, I was probably just projecting my own loneliness onto some recluse who wanted to be left alone. I decided to let it go. But then the notes started. The first one appeared on a Wednesday morning. Slipped under my door while I slept. It was written on yellowed paper in neat, old-fashioned cursive that looked like it belonged in a different century. "Your light keeps me company in the dark hours. Thank you for burning bright." No signature. No explanation. I stared at it for a long time, my coffee growing cold beside me. The message itself wasn't threatening, if anything. It was almost touching. But something about it made my skin crawl. The formality of the language. The implication that someone was watching my apartment, noting when I kept my lights on. I checked my peephole obsessively that day, but for C's door remained closed. That night, I closed all my curtains, even though my windows faced the parking lot. Not another building. The second note came 3 days later. "I see you water your plants every morning at 8:15. They're thriving under your care. I wish I could feel the sun again." This one was worse. It meant someone was watching me through my windows, or somehow seeing into my apartment. I checked every window, every possible sight line. My apartment was on the 4th floor, and there were no buildings close enough for anyone to see in clearly. Unless they were in the hallway when I opened my door. Unless they were somehow watching through my peephole. I ordered a peephole cover that same day. For today's shipping, the notes continued, arriving every few days. Always slipped under my door in the dead of night. Your music soothes the screaming in my head. I count your breaths when you sleep. 16,847 last night. Each one a miracle do. You ever feel like your skin doesn't fit right? Like you're wearing someone else's face? That last one made me call the police. Officer Martinez seemed skeptical from the moment he arrived, but he dutifully wrote down my statement and collected the notes I'd saved. And you've never actually seen this person? He asked, flipping through his notebook. No. But that's the point. They're watching me. Leaving these notes, has there been any direct threat? Any attempt to enter your apartment or harm you in any way? Well, no. But has anything been stolen? Any property damage? I felt my frustration building. You're not taking this seriously. Martinez's expression softened slightly. Miss Chen, I understand you're concerned. But legally, there's not much we can do about anonymous notes unless they contain specific threats. What I can do is talk to your building manager. Maybe have a patrol car swing by more often. What about talking to my neighbor, the person in for C? We can knock on the door, but if they don't answer, we can't force entry without probable cause or a warrant. Has your landlord expressed any concerns about this tenant? I shook my head, defeated. Martinez did knock on C's door before he left. 3 solid raps that echoed through the hallway. Mrs. Kowalski peeked out from 4A. Curiosity evident on her face. No response. See, I said. There's something wrong here. Martinez knocked again, louder. Police, need to ask you some questions. Still, nothing. Could be out, Martinez said, though he didn't sound convinced. He pulled out a card and handed it to me. Call me if you receive any notes that contain threats or if you feel you're in immediate danger. In the meantime, document everything. Take photos of the notes. Keep a log of any incidents. If this escalates, we'll need that evidence. After he left, I stood in my apartment and stared at the wall I shared with C. Somewhere on the other side, I knew someone was standing, listening, maybe even staring at the same wall. I know you're there, I whispered to the paint and plaster. At night, I heard the footsteps again. Back and forth. But this time, they stopped directly against our shared wall, right where I'd been standing earlier. And then came the scratching. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every sound jerked me awake, the building settling, pipes groaning, the wind against windows. But worst were the real sounds, the ones I couldn't explain away. The scratching came every night now, always around 3 a.m. Not frantic or violent, but methodical, like someone was slowly, carefully trying to claw through the wall. I'd press my ear against it and hear what sounded like whispered counting. 1, 2, 3. The numbers never went past 10 before starting over. I tried talking to Dennis, the super, but he was even less helpful than the police. Astor's tenant in 4C's been here longer than I have. He grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. Never missed rent, never caused problems. Not my business what they do in their apartment as long as they're not breaking anything. But don't you think it's strange you've never seen them? Don't you have to do inspections or maintenance? They refuse entry for inspections. That's their right. Maintenance requests go to a voicemail. Anything that needs fixing, they leave a note on the door and I fix it when they're out. Been working fine for years. When they're out, so they do. Leave. Dennis finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Must do some time. Can't live in an apartment 24/7s forever. But I wasn't so sure anymore. I started doing research. Late at night, I'd scour the internet for information about the building, about the tenants, about anything that might explain what was happening. Maple Grove Residences was built in 1952. Nothing remarkable, no murders, no scandals, no dark history, just a boring apartment building that had slowly decayed over the decades. Then I found an old newspaper article from 1998. Woman found dead in apartment after 3 months. My blood ran cold as I read. A woman named Eleanor Vance had died in her apartment in this building and hadn't been discovered until her family finally convinced the landlord to check on her. She'd been a recluse, hadn't left her apartment in years. The medical examiner, estimated she'd been dead for at least 3 months before discovery. The article didn't specify which apartment. I went down the rabbit hole, found more articles, more information. Eleanor Vance had been a former nurse who developed severe agoraphobia after witnessing something traumatic during a night shift at St. Michael's Hospital. The articles were vague about what she'd seen, but after that incident, she'd locked herself away from the world. In one article, there was a photo. Eleanor Vance stared at the camera with hollow eyes, her face gaunt and pale. The caption read, "Eleanor Vance, taken 6 months before her death." The photo showed her standing in front of a door. I zoomed in, hands shaking. The door number was clearly visible for C. I couldn't eat after that discovery. Couldn't focus on work. I'd sit at my computer, cursor blinking on an empty screen, while my mind raced with possibilities. Someone had died in that apartment 27 years ago. The current tenant had been there for years, according to Dennis and Mrs. Kowalski. But what if years meant 27 years? What if the tenant in C was connected to Eleanor Vance somehow? Or what if, and this thought kept me awake at night, what if the tenant was Eleanor Vance, and everything I'd read was wrong? I started tracking the noises more carefully. I set up my phone to record at night, hoping to catch something concrete. The scratching, the footsteps, the whispered counting, all of it. The recordings picked up sounds, but they were distorted, like they'd been passed through water. The footsteps sounded wet. The scratching had an organic quality that made me think of fingernails wearing down to bloody nubs. And the counting sounded like it was coming from multiple voices, all slightly out of sync with each other. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. I played the recordings for Mrs. Kowalski. She listened with a deepening frown, then handed my phone back. "That's just old building sounds, honey. Pipes and settling. Mrs. K. Those are footsteps, and scratching, and counting." She patted my hand, her skin papery and cold. "You've been stressed, dear. Maybe you should visit your family for a few days. Get some rest." But I couldn't leave. Something was happening. Something was building, and I needed to understand what it was. The notes had stopped coming, which somehow made things worse. At least the notes had been communication, evidence that someone was there. The silence felt like waiting for a storm to break. On Friday night, 1 week after finding the article about Eleanor Vance, I made a decision. I was going to knock on that door. Not just knock, I was going to stand there until someone answered, even if it took hours. I waited until 2 a.m., when the footsteps usually started. When I heard the first creak from C, I threw on my robe and stepped into the hallway. The corridor was dark, the overhead light had burned out 2 days ago, and Dennis hadn't replaced it yet. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick and viscous. The air felt heavy, like before a thunderstorm. I stood in front of C, my hand raised to knock. Through the door, I could hear the footsteps clearly now. Back and forth, getting closer to the door. They stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear anything breathing, movement, anything. The silence stretched out, oppressive, and expectant. Then, so softly I almost missed it. A voice from the other side. "I've been waiting for you, Sarah." My hand dropped. That voice, it was familiar and wrong at the same time. Like hearing your own voice on a recording, but distorted, uncanny. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. "Come inside. It's time you knew the truth." The lock clicked. The doorknob turned. The door opened slowly, revealing darkness beyond. Not the ordinary darkness of an unlit apartment. This was absolute. A void that seemed to drink in the dim light from the hallway. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, taking a step back. "You've been looking for me, researching, trying to understand." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You wanted to know why I haven't moved in years. Come inside, Sarah. See for yourself." Every instinct screamed at me to run, to go back to my apartment and lock the door and never come out again. But I'd come this far. I needed answers. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped across the threshold. The smell hit me first, not decay like I'd expected, but something chemical and antiseptic. Like a hospital, my flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing an apartment identical in layout to mine, but completely different in every other way. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all overlapping and pinned in layers. I stepped closer, my light revealing face after face after face. All different people, all staring at the camera with the same hollow expression I had seen in Eleanor Vance's newspaper photo. "You recognize them?" the voice asked. It seemed to come from deeper in the apartment, Past the living room. No. Should I? They're all people who died alone, forgotten, undiscovered for weeks, months, sometimes years. I collect them. Remember them. They deserve to be remembered, don't you think? I moved further into the apartment, my light sweeping across the photographs. Some were newspaper clippings, others looked like they'd been printed from the internet. A few looked older, faded with time. The furniture was covered with white sheets, like the apartment had been closed up for a long vacation. But under the sheets, I could see odd shapes, too many angles, too many pieces. Why are you showing me this? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Because you're lonely, Sarah. You work from home. You rarely leave your apartment. You have no family in the city, no close friends. I've watched you for 6 months now. You're becoming like them. The voice paused, like me. I turned toward where the voice was coming from, the bedroom door at the end of the hall. It was cracked open, and through it, I could see a faint blue glow, like a computer screen. Eleanor Vance died in this apartment, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Are you related to her? Silence. Then, quietly, I am Eleanor Vance. My blood turned to ice. That's impossible. You died in 1998, did I? Come see for yourself. Come into the bedroom, Sarah. Come meet me properly. I should have run then. Should have turned and fled. Instead, I found myself walking toward that bedroom door, pulled forward by a sick curiosity I couldn't resist. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The blue glow came from a laptop on a desk, its screen filled with security camera feeds. I recognized them immediately, views of the hallway, the stairs, the lobby. The building had cameras, but I'd never known anyone had access to the feeds. But it was what was on the bed that made me drop my phone. There was someone lying there, or something that had once been someone. The body, I couldn't think of it any other way, was impossibly thin, desiccated, like it had been mummified. The skin was gray and papery, stretched tight over prominent bones, but the chest was moving, rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. The head turned toward me, and I saw the face. Even after years of decay, I recognized it from the newspaper. Photo. Eleanor Vance smiled at me with cracked, dry lips. Hello, neighbor, she whispered, and her voice was the same one that had been leaving me notes, that had been calling to me through the door. I've been so lonely. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep breathing. My phone's flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into darkness illuminated only by the cold glow of the laptop screen. In that moment, I understood. Eleanor Vance had been dying, slowly, for 27 years. Not quite dead enough to be discovered, but not quite alive enough to truly live. Sustained by what? Stubbornness? Fear? Some terrible in-between state that defied medical explanation. And she'd been watching me, studying me, seeing herself in my isolation and loneliness. Asterisk, I can teach you, Eleanor whispered in the darkness. How to exist in the spaces between. How to watch the world without being part of it. You're so close already, Sarah, so close to understanding. I finally found my voice. I'm not like you. Not yet, but you will be. We all become what we fear eventually. The isolation. The loneliness, it's already eating away at you. I can see it. Soon, you'll stop leaving the apartment entirely. Stop answering calls. Stop being part of the world. And when that happens, I'll be here. We can be alone together. The bed creaked as she sat up, that impossibly thin body moving with a horrible insectal grace. What do you say, Sarah? Will you stay with me? I backed toward the door, my hands shaking. No. I'm leaving. I'm moving out. You can't leave. I've already started the process. Haven't you noticed? The way time feels different. The way the walls seem closer? You haven't left the building in 3 days, Sarah. I froze. She was right. I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually gone outside. The groceries I'd been carrying that first day, had that really been months ago? Or just days? Time had become elastic, unreliable. You're lying, I said. But my voice shook. Eleanor stood up from the bed, and I finally saw the full horror of her. She'd been lying there so long that her body had begun to fuse with the mattress. Flesh and fabric had merged in places, and as she moved, I heard the wet, tearing sounds of skin separating from springs and foam. Asterisk tubes ran from her arms to her bags hanging on a makeshift stand. The bags were filled with the dark liquid I didn't want to identify. This was how she'd survived some twisted parody of medical care, keeping herself barely alive in this tomb of an apartment. I'm not lying, she said, taking a step closer. I'm trying to help you. The loneliness will kill you, Sarah, just like it killed me. But we don't have to be alone anymore. We can watch the world together. Forever. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard Eleanor moving faster than should have been possible for someone in her condition. The tubes must have torn free because I heard things crashing, the sound of stands falling. I burst into the hallway, and reality seemed to warp around me. The corridor stretched impossibly long, the walls breathing in and out like lungs. The burned-out light fixture overhead flickered to life, then died, then flickered again. Throbbing like a heartbeat. My apartment door looked miles away. Eleanor's voice followed me, no longer coming from one place, but echoing from all directions. You can't escape, Sarah. You're already part of this place. Part of me. I've been feeding on your loneliness, your isolation, every night you stayed in, every call you didn't answer, every connection you let wither. You were feeding me, making me stronger. I ran anyway, my bare feet slapping against the carpet behind me. I heard more doors opening for Mrs. Kowalski's apartment. The door swung wide, revealing darkness and the sound of wet breathing. Had Mrs. Kowalski been real, or another part of Eleanor's trap? I reached my door and fumbled with the knob. It was locked. Why was it locked? I never locked it when I was just stepping into the hallway. You left it locked, Eleanor said. She was standing at the end of the hallway now, silhouetted against the darkness of her open apartment. The tubes still trailed from her arms, leaving dark streaks on the carpet. 3 days ago, when you stopped leaving, you locked yourself. And just like I did, just like we all do eventually, I pounded on my door, screaming for help. But I knew no one would come. The building was full of isolated people, all locked in their own apartments, all pretending the world outside didn't exist. My phone, I dropped it in Eleanor's apartment. No way to call for help. Eleanor moved closer, her footsteps leaving. Wet marks. It's not so bad, Sarah. The first few years are the hardest, but then you adjust. You stop wanting human contact. Stop craving the sun. You learn to live in the dark, in the silence, in the space between heartbeats. Someone will find us, I said. But the words felt hollow. The police, or Dennis. Or, no one found me for 27 years. No one will find you either. We pay our rent on time. We don't make noise. We're the perfect tenants. She smiled, and in the flickering light, I saw that her teeth had yellowed and loosened, some hanging by threads of gum. Join me, Sarah. Or, die alone in your apartment like I did. At least with me, you'll have company. She was right in front of me now. I could smell the antiseptic odor mixing with something worse, the sweet, cloying smell of decay held at bay by desperate measures. She reached out with one withered hand, and I saw the needles still embedded in her forearm, the tube dangling, and dripping that dark liquid onto the floor. Her fingers brushed my cheek, and they were so cold. Last chance, she whispered. Come back with me. Let me teach you how to survive in the darkness. Or what? I managed to ask. Or I'll leave you alone, truly alone. And you'll discover that loneliness isn't just uncomfortable or sad. It's hungry, Sarah. It eats you from the inside out until there's nothing left but a hollow shell that still somehow keeps breathing. Behind me, my apartment door clicked. It was unlocked. I didn't think. I twisted the knob and threw myself through the opening, slamming the door behind me. I engaged the deadbolt, the chain, pressed my back against the wood and slid down to the floor. On the other side, Eleanor spoke one last time. I'll be here when you're ready. I'll always be here. We all will. My neighbor hasn't moved in years. And now I know why. I don't know how long I sat against the door. Minutes. Hours. Time had become meaningless, just like Eleanor said. When I finally stood on shaking legs, the first thing I noticed was wrong, very wrong. My apartment wasn't my apartment. The layout was the same. The furniture was in the right places, but everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, like no one had lived here in weeks. My laptop sat open on the desk, its screen dark and lifeless. The battery had died long ago. My plants, the ones Eleanor had mentioned in her notes, were brown and withered, soiled, dry and cracked. No, I whispered, moving to the window. No. I yanked open the curtains I'd closed when, days ago, weeks, outside. The parking lot was the same as always. Cars sat in their spots, but something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, then realized they were the same cars in the exact same positions I'd seen the last time. I looked out this window. No one had come or gone. I checked my phone. Dead battery. I plugged it in, but the outlet didn't work. I tried the light switch. Nothing. I went to the kitchen and turned the faucet. No water. The utilities had been shut off. For how long? I ran to my front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was dark and empty. Eleanor's door was closed. Everything looked normal except for that persistent wrongness, like looking at a photograph of a place instead of the place itself. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the locks, but I had to get out. Had to prove Eleanor wrong. I wasn't trapped here. I wasn't becoming like her. I opened the door. The hallway was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, no monster or obvious horror. Just off. The carpet pattern was slightly different. The paint color wasn't quite right. The apartment doors all looked the same, but the numbers were in a different font. And it was silent. Completely silent. In a building with dozens of residents, there should be some noise. TVs. Conversations. Footsteps. But there was nothing except the sound of my own breathing. Mrs. Kowalski. I called out, my voice swallowed by the stillness. Her door for A was closed. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Mrs. K, are you there? The door swung open on its own, revealing an apartment identical to Eleanor's. Photographs covering every wall. Furniture under white sheets. The smell of antiseptic and decay. But no Mrs. Kowalski. I backed away and tried the other apartments on the floor. For D, for E, for F. Each one open to the same scene. Photographs of dead people. Covered furniture. Empty rooms that somehow felt occupied. The entire floor was a mirror of Eleanor's apartment. A horrible understanding was beginning to dawn on me. I made my way downstairs. Each floor revealing the same nightmare. Every apartment was the same. Photographs, white sheets, that chemical smell. All of them abandoned, but carefully maintained, like museum exhibits of loneliness. The third floor was worse than the fourth. The photographs here were older, some fading to sepia tones. Black and white images of people from the 1970s, the 1960s, even earlier. How long had the shadow building been claiming people? I stopped in front of 3B and pushed open the door. Inside, the walls were covered with newspaper clippings about missing persons, all from different decades. At the center of one wall, someone had written in what looked like dried blood, "We are all still here." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I imagined whoever had written it, trapped in this place, slowly going mad as they realized no one was coming to save them, that they'd been forgotten by the world they'd forgotten first. On the second floor, I found the first body. It was an apartment to G, sitting in a chair facing the window. At first, I thought it was a mannequin. The skin was too perfect, too smooth like wax. But as I got closer, I saw the slight rise and fall of the chest, breathing, barely. The person I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept staring out the window at the parking lot, at those same unmoving cars. The eyes didn't blink, didn't track movement. They might as well have been made of glass. Double quotes, hello. I whispered, can you hear me? No response. But the eyes moved. Slowly, mechanically, they tracked from the window to meet my gaze, empty. Completely empty. There was no recognition there. No humanity. Just a hollow stare that looked through me rather than at me. This person had been here so long that they'd forgotten how to be a person at all. I stumbled back and ran for the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found more of them on the first floor. Apartment 1E, a woman lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her chest barely moved. When I got close, I could see her lips moving soundlessly, forming words over and over. I leaned in to try to read them. Help me, help me, help me. But her voice was gone. Or maybe she'd screamed herself silent years ago. And now all that was left was the muscle memory of asking for rescue that would never come. Apartment 1B, a man standing in the shower, fully clothed, unmoving except for that shallow breathing. Water dripped from the shower head onto his head, but the water never ran, just one drop, falling every few seconds onto the same spot on his scalp, which had worn away to show bone beneath. They were all like Eleanor, caught between life and death, existing in that terrible in-between state. But unlike Eleanor, these ones had given up. They weren't even trying to hold on to consciousness anymore. They were just waiting. For what? For death that wouldn't come, for rescue that was impossible. How many people were in this building? How many had been slowly dying for years, decades, while the world outside forgot about them. 10, 20, more. I reached the ground floor and ran for the main entrance. The glass doors that should lead outside were there, but when I looked through them, I didn't see the street. I saw the hallway. I saw the fourth floor, my apartment door visible in the distance. I was looking at a loop, a closed circuit. The building didn't lead outside anymore, it only led back to itself. This isn't real, I said aloud, pressing my hands against the glass. This isn't real. I'm dreaming or hallucinating, or it's very real, Sarah. I spun around. Eleanor stood in the lobby, still trailing those IVs, still dripping that dark liquid. But she looked different now, stronger, somehow more solid, like my fear was feeding her. What did you do? I demanded. What is this place? This is Maple Grove Residences, Eleanor said simply. Or rather, what Maple Grove Residences has become. What every place becomes when enough lonely people live and die within its walls. Their isolation soaks into the foundation, the walls, the very air. It creates pockets, spaces between spaces. That's insane, is it? You've read about haunted houses, haven't you? Places where trauma leaves an impression. This is the same, but it's not trauma that haunts these walls. It's loneliness, isolation, the quiet desperation of people who forgot how to be part of the world. She moved closer, and I backed against the glass door. We all came here alone, Eleanor continued. All of us on the fourth floor, and the third floor, and the second. We moved in during different decades, different years. But we all made the same mistake. We let the isolation take root. We stopped reaching out, stopped leaving. And eventually, the building claimed us. The building is just a building. It's not alive, isn't it? Think about it, Sarah. You've been here 6 months. How many real connections have you made? How many times have you left the building? When was the last time someone visited you? I couldn't answer, because she was right. I've been so focused on building my freelance career, so caught up in work and the convenience of never having to leave my apartment for anything important. Groceries delivered, work done online, social life reduced to occasional texts that became less frequent over time. I've been isolating myself long before I ever heard Eleanor's footsteps. 3 days, Eleanor said softly. That's how long it takes for the building to claim you once you've decided consciously or not that you don't want to leave anymore. 3 days of unbroken isolation, and the walls start to change around you. The utilities shut off, but you don't notice because you're not using them. The door still opens and closes, but it no longer leads outside. It leads here, to us. I don't believe you, don't you? Then explain the dust in your apartment, the dead plants, the unpaid bills piling up by your door. Did you see those? The eviction notice that's 3 months old. I hadn't seen those things, hadn't noticed them, because I'd been in denial, just like Eleanor said. How long have I been here? I asked, my voice breaking. Really? Eleanor's expression, what I could see of it on that ruined face, was almost pitying. You moved into Furby 6 months ago, but you moved into this version of Furby 3 months ago. You've been in the building's pocket for 3 months, Sarah, slowly dying, just like the rest of us. I sank to the floor, my back against the impossible door. 3 months. I'd lost 3 months of my life. The notes, I said, trying to piece it together. You were trying to warn me. At first, yes, I've been here the longest. I remember what it was like before, when I was fully alive. I tried to warn you, to make you see what was happening. But the longer you stayed, the more I realized. She paused. I realized how nice it would be to have company. Real company. Not just the shells in the other apartments. The others. The ones I saw. Are they all dead? Mostly. Some have been gone for years but haven't stopped breathing yet. The building keeps us alive enough to be present, to maintain its existence. We're part of its structure now, as essential as the walls and floors. A horrible thought occurred to me. The real Maple Grove Residences. The actual building. Where is it? Still there. Still standing. People still live in it, pay rent. Come and go. Dennis still fixes the leaks and Mrs. Kowalski still bakes cookies for the new tenants. But we're not there anymore. We're here, in the echo of it. The shadow building. The place where all the loneliness and isolation accumulated until it became substantial enough to exist on its own. I thought about the parking lot, the cars that never moved, the hallway that looped back on itself. It made a horrible kind of sense. How do I get out? I asked. There has to be a way. Eleanor was quiet. For a long moment, when she spoke again, her voice was different, sad, almost human. I don't know if you can. I've been trying to find the way back for 27 years. Every door leads here. Every window looks out on the same view. Every attempt to leave just brings you back to your apartment, but you said it takes 3 days to be claimed. What if I can reverse it? What if I can break the pattern? The pattern breaks you, Sarah. That's how this works. The longer you're here, the more you become like us. Eventually, you'll stop trying to leave. You'll accept this place, and then you'll just exist forever. I stood up, my legs unsteady, but my resolve hardening. No, I won't accept that. There has to be something we're missing, some way to break the cycle. Eleanor's voice held a note of hope. You said you've been trying to find a way out, but have you been trying alone? She nodded slowly. Then, maybe that's the problem. Maybe isolation is what keeps us here, and connection is what sets us free. Over the next hours, or what felt like hours, time was unreliable here. I explored the building with Eleanor following behind me. We checked every apartment, every floor, looking for anything unusual, any clue. What I found was heartbreaking. In apartment 3E, a young man sat at a computer, his fingers still resting on the keyboard. On the screen was an unsent email to his mother. Dear Mom, I'm sorry I haven't called. I've been busy, but I think about you every day. I promise I'll visit soon. The email was dated 5 years ago. In apartment 2A, an elderly woman sat in a chair with a phone in her lap. Her contact list was open, dozens of names, family, friends, old colleagues, but the call log showed nothing. She'd opened the phone 1,000 times but never dialed. Every apartment told the same story. People on the verge of reaching out, of reconnecting, of breaking their isolation. But they never quite did. And so the building claimed them. They all have anchors, I said, thinking aloud. Things that connect them to the outside world. Emails they wanted to send. Calls they meant to make. Visits they planned but never took. But they're all unfinished, Eleanor said. Intentions without actions. That's not enough to break free. What was yours? I asked. Your anchor. Eleanor was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I had a sister, younger than me. We fought before I locked myself away. Something stupid. I can't even remember what. I wanted to call her, apologize, but I was afraid she wouldn't answer, or worse, that she'd tell me I was right to stay away. So I didn't call. And then days became weeks, became months, became this. Is she still alive? I don't know. Maybe. She'd be in her 60s now. Probably has grandchildren I've never met. I thought about my own connections. My parents, who I talked to once a month if they were lucky. My college friends, who I'd gradually stopped responding to. The life I'd had before this apartment, before the isolation became comfortable. My anchor is my brother, I said quietly, James. We used to be close. He kept calling after I moved here, wanting to visit, wanting to make sure I was okay. I kept putting him off. Eventually, he stopped calling. I told myself it was fine, that I was just busy. But really, I was scared he'd see how small my life had become. Eleanor's withered hand found mine. Her touch was still cold, but somehow less frightening than before. Then we need to call him, she said. Both of our anchors. Your brother and my sister. We need to reach out, complete the connection. Maybe that's what breaks the pattern. But the phones don't work here. The utilities don't work in the shadow building. Eleanor finished. But what if we could reach the real building? Find a way to make our voices heard in the actual world. Chapter 13. The phone call. We went back to Eleanor's apartment tower apartments, really. Since in the shadow building all the apartments were the same. She showed me something I hadn't noticed before. An old rotary phone sitting on a table, disconnected from any wall jack. I've tried it 1,000 times, Eleanor said. It never works. But maybe together it will. I finished. It sounded impossible. Magical thinking. But everything about the situation was impossible, so why not try? We sat on either side of the phone. Eleanor picked up the receiver with trembling hands and held it between us so we could both hear. Static. Empty static. But then, very faintly, beneath the static, a dial tone. Asterisk. My heart leapt. It's working. Eleanor's fingers shook as she dialed. But whose number? She didn't remember her sister's current number. And I didn't have James's memorized. The dial tone wavered and died. No, Eleanor whispered. Please work. Asterisk. I grabbed her hand. Wait, Don't give up. Think. What number do you remember? Any number that connects you to the outside world. I don't. Her face crumpled. I can't remember. It's been so long. I can't remember my sister's name. The isolation had eaten away her memories, leaving only the loneliness behind. Soon, I'd be the same way. I could already feel it. James's face was getting harder to picture, his voice fading from memory. But I remembered one thing. One number I'd always known, even as a kid. My parents' landline, I said. They never changed it. I can try that. I took the receiver and dialed the number from muscle memory. The rotary phone clicked and spun, each number taking forever. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then, hello. My mother's voice. Faint and distant, like she was calling from the other side of the universe, but unmistakably her. Mom, I choked out. Mom, it's Sarah. I need help. Sarah. Her voice was confused, concerned. Honey, where are you? We've been trying to reach you for months. Your landlord called us, said you hadn't paid rent, that your apartment was empty. We filed a missing persons report. The police have been looking. Mom, listen to me. I'm in the building. I'm trapped in some kind of... I don't know how to explain it, but I need you to call James. Tell him to come to Maple Grove Residences, apartment for B. Tell him to come and... What? Break me out of a shadow dimension. Tell him to call for me. Loud. I'll try to hear him. Sarah, you're not making sense. Are you hurt? Are you? The line went dead. Eleanor and I stared at each other. Did that really happen? I asked. I heard her too. Eleanor confirmed. Your mother. She heard you. She knows you're alive. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a solution. But it was something. A connection made. A thread reaching from the shadow building to the real world. Now we just had to hope it was strong enough to pull us back. Chapter 14. The rescue. We waited by the main entrance, watching through those impossible glass doors for any sign that help was coming. Time had no meaning, but eventually, hours later, days, I saw movement. A figure appeared in the hallway on the other side of the glass. Not the shadow hallway that looped back on itself, but the real one. I could tell because the colors were brighter, more vivid. The air looked clearer. The figure got closer, and I recognized him. James. My brother. Older than I remembered, his hair showing gray at the temples, but unmistakably him. He was looking around, confused. Then he cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, Sarah, Sarah, are you here? His voice came through the glass, muffled and distant, but I could hear it. I pounded on the glass. James, I'm here. I'm right here. He didn't react, couldn't hear me, couldn't see me. This isn't working, Eleanor said. The barriers between the buildings are too strong. You need something more. A stronger connection. Like what? Like the truth. Like all the things you wanted to say, but never did. I pressed my hands against the glass and started talking, shouting, pouring out everything I'd held back for years. James, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I stopped answering your calls. I was scared you'd see how small and pathetic my life had become. I was ashamed that I'd let my career consume me, that I'd let all my relationships wither. I didn't know how to tell you I was drowning in loneliness while pretending everything was fine. On the other side of the glass, James stopped moving, his head tilted, like he'd heard something. Keep going, Eleanor urged. I miss you. I cried. I miss our Sunday calls. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss being your sister instead of just a voice on the phone once a month. I want to come back. I want to be part of the world again, please. James, please help me find the way back. James moved closer to the door. He pressed his hand against the glass, and even though he couldn't see me, I pressed mine against the same spot. I miss my sister, he said, and I heard him clearly now. I miss her so much, if you can hear me. Sarah, wherever you are, come home. Please come home. The glass between us began to warm. Then it began to glow. Eleanor grabbed my other hand. Sarah, if this works, if you can cross back, you have to promise me something. What? Call my sister. Her name is Margaret. Margaret Vance. She lives in... Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating. Portland, I think. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I want to come home to. Come with me, I said. Cross over with me. We can both. I've been here too long. 27 years in the shadow. There's barely anything left of me that's real. But you still have a chance. Take it. The glass was glowing brighter now, becoming translucent, then transparent. I could see James clearly, could see the real hallway beyond. "I don't want to leave you here," I said. Eleanor smiled, and for just a moment, she looked the way she must have looked before the isolation consumed her. Young and hopeful and human. "You're not leaving me. You're saving me. By remembering me. By telling Margaret I'm sorry. That's more than I've had in 27 years." The barrier was dissolving. I could feel it. "Remember the others too," Eleanor said quickly. "All the people in the shadow building. They all have someone who misses them, who wants them to come home. Be their connection to the world. Help them remember they're not alone." The glass vanished entirely. James's hand, solid and warm, grabbed mine. "Sarah," he gasped. "Oh my God, Sarah." I looked back at Eleanor one last time. She was fading already, becoming translucent and substantial. But she was smiling. "Go," she whispered. "Live. Connect. Don't let the loneliness win." James pulled me through the doorway, and I stumbled into the real hallway of Maple Grove Residences. The colors were overwhelming after so long, and the shadow bright and loud and alive. Behind me, the entrance to the shadow building sealed itself, just a normal glass door showing a normal lobby. But I knew it was still there, waiting, full of lonely souls who'd forgotten how to find their way home. The next few weeks were a blur. Hospital visits, police interviews, confused questions about where I'd been, why my apartment showed signs of abandonment, how I'd survived 3 months without anyone seeing me. I told them the truth as best I could, though I'm not sure anyone believed me. They chalked it up to a mental health crisis, some kind of dissociative episode. Maybe they were right. Maybe the shadow building was just a metaphor my mind created to process the isolation. But I knew better. I kept my promise to Eleanor. I found Margaret Vance in Portland, a retired teacher with silver hair and kind eyes. When I told her about Eleanor, about the apology and the love, she cried for an hour. "She's really alive?" Margaret asked through her tears. "After all these years, in a way," I said carefully. "But she needs you to know she's sorry. She needs to know you forgive her." Of course I forgive her. I never stopped loving her. I just thought. She looked at me with desperate hope. "Can I see her? Can I talk to her?" I thought about the shadow building, about the barrier between worlds, about whether love and forgiveness could reach through that divide. "I think," I said slowly, "that if you go to Maple Grove Residences, apartment for C, and you call to her with all the love you have, she might hear you. She might be able to find her way back." I don't know if Margaret ever went to the building. Don't know if Eleanor made it back to the real world. But I like to think she did. I like to think that love was strong enough to pull her out of the shadow. I moved out of Maple Grove Residences, obviously. Got a new apartment across town, on the 5th floor of a building that's always noisy and full of life. I started therapy, started reconnecting with old friends, made new ones. I call James every Sunday now. Sometimes we just talk about nothing, the weather, work, stupid jokes, but sometimes we talk about real things, our fears, our struggles, the ways we felt lonely and disconnected. And the loneliness doesn't win anymore. But I still think about the shadow building, about all those souls, trapped between worlds, slowly fading into nothing because they forgot how to connect. So I started a project, a website where people can share stories about lost loved ones, people who've isolated themselves, people who've disappeared into their own loneliness. I match family members with information. I encourage people to reach out, to make that call, to send that email. I help people complete their connections. Because I learned something important in that shadow place. Loneliness isn't just an emotion. It's a force, a hunger. If you feed it long enough, it becomes real enough to trap you. But connection is stronger. Love is stronger. And sometimes all it takes is one phone call, one email, one knock on the door to pull someone back from the edge. Epilogue. It's been a year since I escaped the shadow building. I drive past Maple Grove Residences sometimes, just to check on it. The real building looks normal enough. People come and go. Lights turn on and off in the windows. But if you look carefully at apartment for C, you might notice that the curtains never move. The lights never change. And if you watch long enough, you might see a thin figure standing in the window, looking out at the world they left behind. I saw her once, about 6 months ago. Eleanor, or what was left of her. She raised one withered hand in a wave, and I waved back. Then I went home and called my brother. Because that's how you fight the darkness. Not with grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but with small, consistent connections. A phone call, a text, message, a visit. Don't let yourself become a ghost in your own life. Don't let the loneliness win. And if you know someone who's isolated, who's withdrawn from the world, reach out to them. Call them. Visit them. Remind them that they're not alone. You might just save their life, or even their soul. The end.